Greetings and felicitations. I am Ian McCombs. We're going to talk about my third book I've written, Book 3. Book 3. The Flaming Dumpster Fire Bringer of Doom. On this very night, 5 years ago, on this very internet web tubules, in a dense mind fog, just like this, I wrote the worst book I ever seen. It had a plot that went nowhere and made no sense, like a fever dream dropped into an acid trip. And when they pulled the book from the twisted, burning, plagued dumpster fire, it looked like this! Ah! Why? Yes, audience, that was the worst book I ever seen. Salutations and adoration, my dear audience. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of dramatic reenactment. I thought it was apropos, as the terrible, awful nature of that book was just beyond the pale. Book 3 was indeed the worst thing I'd ever written. I'm going to go into 5 things I did wrong. If I did a top 10, it would really just be a repeat of the same things I did in my previous 2 videos in this series. I'm going to explain why this book almost broke me as a writer, which will be some pretty heavy personal stuff. Number 1 is lack of planning. I'm not a discovery writer that explores and finds the story as I write. I've learned that now, but back then I had no idea. In my first year of writing, I wrote 3 books very quickly. However, they were all terrible. I thought I knew the characters and the setting and the general idea of where I wanted everything to go, so I figured I could just rely on my obvious brilliance to fix any problems. Sadly, muse farts and rainbow diarrhea from the mind didn't help any of this mess. I later took a plot outline guide and used that. I did that for my next several books. I was very rigid in how I did that, which when we get to book 4 and 5, I'll explain the problems with that. I put in a lot of plot points that were for my first 2 books in book 3, and the imagining really wasn't helpful. If you're outlining writer, putting points in there, if it works for you, doesn't confine you, doesn't make you a little crazy, and then that works. However, I thought I had done enough rumination. I thought I had done a ton of imagining for book 3, but unfortunately I didn't. And so when I started it, I had nowhere to go. I took minor characters from book 1 and 2, walked them through essentially the universe to say, hey, here it is again. But there wasn't much plot. There wasn't really an overarching change in any of the characters. Nothing really happened. It didn't feel like it went anywhere. And so there wasn't much there. Number 2 is characterization. I accidentally created the main character in book 3 in book 2, and I really loved her. I adored her character, so I wanted to give her a whole book just about herself. I did, but the book that I gave her really didn't live up to how awesome I really think she is as a character. I thought I knew who she was, that I could write a whole book around her, but unfortunately I didn't do enough thinking, imagining, and planning. Discovery writers can figure everything out as they go, but part of it is also imagination. You figure out what's happening as you go, and sometimes you may have to stop, not even write a little bit, and just imagine what that character is doing, who they are, what they're doing, what are their mannerisms, what is their personality, what do they want, what do they need. There's two big ones. And every outliner does this hopefully to an extent, but even, pantsers can do the same thing with guided imagination. Number 3 is a terrible, pointless protagonist. In my first book, I made a passive and essentially pointless protagonist who didn't do much. In book 3, I had a viewpoint character who you're seeing the book through, a secondary character who's watching the main character, who's essentially the protagonist, do everything. So you can imagine a Watson to a Sherlock Holmes almost. However, my Watson had no real purpose, no real point. Even when I figured out who this person was and what kind of plot or overarching conflict they would have, I flinched from it and I didn't really want to put them in to a juicy plot. And so I had no idea who he was, what he needed, what he wanted. I had no idea his mannerisms or why he was really doing much. What I mainly knew was his hair color, eye color, which isn't much of a character. Thus, if you really want to get a character to do a bunch of cool stuff and to really engage the reader, have a compelling character. And since my viewpoint character didn't do anything except go, wow, that's amazing, I should have gotten rid of that character, made them an actual non-viewpoint character, and had the main protagonist character be the viewpoint character, so that way you could read about this person that I really loved and enjoyed and seeing the world through their mind. So the solution, I think, is to remove that character, make that main character the actual viewpoint character, and then go through that story from her point of view. So ask yourself, is this viewpoint character a sidekick? And that can be done well. However, again, first year of writing, third book, I did not do it well. So you have to ask yourself, whose story is this? Who's changing? And I don't mean just on the outside, but on the inside, what are their needs and wants, and how does that change over time? Is there an arc? Is there a story there? And that's one of the things that I didn't understand in the beginning, and that's one of the reasons why book 3 has a lot of problems that it does. Number 4 is flinching from conflict and plot. I thought I had this good, amazing plot. This book was going to weave through books 1 and book 2, same universe, some of the same characters, and this book would fill in some of the holes of book 1 and book 2. So obviously this could essentially be small vignettes of the world and of the story that you're missing in one book, book 1 and book 2. Terrible idea, did not work. Each book should stand on its own merit and have its own plot, its own growth, its own merits. You should have its own, each book should have its own plot and story arc, so that way there's a reason for it to exist as a story in and of itself. Doing something like the Subterranean can be very good, but that was built upon sturdy foundations of books and books and books. I thought of a good plot for this book about halfway through, but instead of them actually engaging in that plot, they literally avoided it by just turning the other way. I rationalized that to myself by saying, well, that's what the characters would do. However, it made a very boring book. Alfred Hitchcock said, why don't the people in the scary movie just call the police, because it's boring. And that's what I did here. I didn't have anything to really catch the characters into the plot. The conflict should have trapped them and made them deal with it, not in a contrived way, but in a way that made sense to the story, to the world, to the characters. This was a big learning experience. However, this learning experience almost broke me permanently as a writer. Number 5 is I didn't really make an ending, I just stopped the story, and the climax really didn't exist. Because this was mainly a reflections of book 1 and book 2, the plot didn't exist. And as I wrote the book, I realized I didn't have an actual clue of what I was doing writing. I thought because I had written book 1 and book 2 and things were on the right track as far as I figured, that things were going fine. I had given my first and second book to a bunch of family and friends, but by the time I finished writing book 3, I hadn't gotten any real criticisms, no feedback, nothing. It wasn't positive or negative, it was just silence. And having apathy and just nothing is worse than even negative criticism, because at least with negative criticism, if someone said, this is good, but this has flaws and here's what you can change, I could have worked with that. It wasn't, hey, this is terrible, please fix this and this might work. It was nothing. My mom, who's my biggest fan and supporter, she really gave me some good feedback for book 1 and book 2. But as much as I love my dear mom, we all know that your mom being your biggest fan should just be normal. So thanks, Mom. I love you very much. I appreciate your support all the time. However, I needed more feedback from, again, family, friends, and more beta readers, as they are called. So with no positive or negative feedback and just complete silence and ambivalence, I knew something was wrong. I knew book 3 was pretty terrible. I got it to 50,000 words, I think it's a total of 51, and the ending essentially just stopped the book because I knew I was done. The unfortunate thing was afterwards, I thought I was going to be done forever. If that previous note seemed ominous, it really should be. The next portion of this video is going to be very personal. The next whole part of this video till the ending really is heart and mind advice as far as writing. Not writing advice per se, but how to get through those bad times, get through the suck to get to better times. So buckle up, let's get through it. I first started writing when I was a young man. I loved it a whole lot, and I wrote everything I could imagine. I wrote a bunch of short stories. I even wrote a novella at age 14. However, every time I gave it to anybody to read, they generally just patted me on the head and walked away without any response. My mom was always very supportive, as always. When I was 10, this was in the beginning, we were at a family dinner and everybody was going around, what do you want to be when you grow up, that kind of thing. And I said at 10 years old that I wanted to be a writer. My older brother and my father laughed at me about that. And not out of malice, not out of hatred. I had quite literally just started reading the year before. I hadn't even gotten through anything other than a cereal box before then. So this sounded a bit far-fetched and was pretty, that seemed reasonable. It seemed kind of silly that this 10-year-old was going to say, I'm going to be a writer. It also seemed a bit strange that this kid who just started writing says, oh, I want to be a writer, when they really I hadn't done much reading. So I don't blame them for laughing. It makes sense. However, past 15, I got less and less writing done. Why? Simple. It was too hard, too much work. I had read some books on how to write, I had written some short stories here and there, and I had read a ton of books from ages 9 to 15. I couldn't read enough, I couldn't read fast enough. I'd go through libraries. The librarians at my elementary school and middle school, they loved me because I would come in every couple of days to get something new to read. But every time I wrote something, people couldn't make heads or tails of it. And there's a specific reason for that, which at some point in time I'll go into the whole neurological reason for that. But that's a very nut and bolt reason why my writing craft is always been hard for me, and why when I give it to folks, they don't quite understand where I'm trying to go. But the biggest reason why I stopped was because I was just being lazy. Lazy to put the time in, lazy to put the effort in. Everything I did, I got to a point of just average, and then I quit. If I could pull out a C+, sure, good enough, who cares? Just time to quit. Why bother trying to do anything better when I could just coast through? I could go into most classes in middle school and high school, pay attention, do some basic work and get an A. I didn't really have to study too much. I failed the gifted class on purpose because I didn't want to put in the effort to actually do the gifted class. This was when I was in elementary school. I had a chance to go to college early, but I intentionally refused to go to the class, to go to the test, so that way I could get into those programs to go into college early. My dad was very angry with me at the time. I played football. I really enjoyed playing football. I really loved loved playing football, especially being on the defensive line, loved that. And I did pretty well. The coaches always wanted me to put some outside work, do some extra practice, maybe some conditioning, doing some weights, and I didn't want to. It was too much work. I figured I could just do what I always did, show up to practice, show up to the games, and I'd be just fine. And then as I got older, other people outpaced me terribly as I was just coasting through average. So I didn't do so very well. I was on break from work when I was in high school. I worked at a grocery store, and one day there was a guy who worked there who asked a couple of neighborhood guys who that plays football could actually have gone on to college, maybe even gone on to the pros, who is good. And two of the guys looked at each other and they said, well, I can tell you who it is. There's one guy who could definitely gone to at least college, probably gone to the pros if he really wanted to, but he never wanted to put in the work. He never wanted to do much more than just show up to practice, half do it, and then not really make much effort beyond that. He slacks off at everything. And the guy said, well, who's that? And they pointed at me. And it was true. I prided myself in my ability to avoid work. I could get away with just doing the bare minimum, and I thought that was a virtue. I thought I was being a very clever boy by not putting the work and effort into my work and my life, my school, and the things that I really did enjoy. I went to college, lived in the dorms. I was a psych major. I was going to minor in economics because I figured I could figure out the grand unification theory of humanity. I thought so highly of myself that I had delusions of grandeur. I had a friend in the dorms who played the bass guitar, and he was good. He practiced. Everybody was getting high, drunk, going out, getting laid. He was there playing his bass guitar. There were times when his roommate was getting it on and he was in the little study room plugging at his bass guitar. I told him I wanted to be a writer, and he said, awesome, let me see some of your work and let me read something. And I said, no, I hate everything I write so much that I burn it, or I tear it up, or I throw it away. Which was true. I did that all the time. Everything I would write, I would burn, I would throw away, I would shred, I would eat, I would poop. Whatever, it didn't matter. I hated everything. So he would play, and sometimes he would mess up, and he said, no, just give me something to read, but I never did. Several years later, I saw him actually playing with a local band on stage, crowd around me, people moshing, good time. It was amazing. He was doing amazing, and I'm rocking out, pumping my fist, doing that thing, screaming, "You're the man!" I was so happy for him, was really proud of where he had gone with, playing in the dorms, just in the study room while everybody else was doing other stuff. And in one of his breaks where he wasn't playing, he looked at me and said, "How's your writing going?" I failed out of college. I didn't try, hardly ever went to class, didn't study. So the problem from high school is I pretty much had to go. College I didn't have to go, so I failed out. After a bad accident, I broke my face. I got back into school. Then I dropped out. I got back into school and I dropped out again. So 9 years after high school graduation, I finally got my degree, mainly because I hated working in restaurants in the kitchen so desperately much that I hated it so much I had to get out of there, and the only way I could figure it out was to get a college degree. During a summer break, I wrote a book. I didn't have much else to do, so I had a whole idea I had been thinking of since I was 13, 14, 15, and I knew these people. I knew their birth, their life, their history. I knew everything about them, and I figured I could just spew all this on the page. And for the first time, I didn't burn it, I didn't throw it away, I didn't delete it, but I did print a copy, gave it to my mom, gave it to my sister. They both looked at it and were confused, had no idea where anything was going, didn't understand really where I was going with it, and it made no sense. Now I understand why, but then I didn't, and it really hurt. But rather than putting the work and effort into making it better, I just stopped. Rather than trying, rather than putting in the work, rather than putting in effort, I wallowed in my self-loathing misery. I didn't put the effort to even try to understand why things weren't working. I had several books on how to write, and I had read them multiple times, rather really digging into them and digging out why things weren't working. I just stopped. I lost myself in video games. It was easier to play video games than actually work on my own writing. I lost myself in other people's universes, their stories, their worlds, rather than doing anything I wanted to do. I just let other people's stories crowd out my own. So I quit. I quit for 10 years. I quit smoking 12 years ago or so. One of the things I did to pass the time as I tried to get healthier is I did endless cardio, and I listened to a whole playlist of music. As I listened to the music, I imagined stories, some of the stories that I had thought of since I was 13, but a lot of them were new stories. So I wanted these new stories to be something new that I could learn how to write and start figuring out how to have my own style, my own voice, and actually get over that hump to get to being a writer. But again, I stopped for 10 years. 10 years I quit writing because it was too much work, it was too hard, I didn't want to, and looking at failure after failure was too difficult for me. If you watched my video on book 1, I eventually got enough of that headspace where I wrote book 1. But again, a lightning bolt hit my computer where my first draft was held, and my computer literally caught on fire. That's how bad it was. On my 20th high school reunion that day, I went to visit my parents. My mom was very worried about something, and my dad looked ill. A dear family of mine had just recently lost their father, and when I saw my father, I knew that I was going to lose mine. Less than a year later, my father died. After he died, I had a crisis. I had a crisis of who I was, what I wanted to do with my life, who I wanted to be, and where I wanted to go. Did my life have any meaning? Was I going to leave this planet without doing anything that I really felt was worthwhile? What did I want to do? Who did I want to be? And I had no answers to those questions. And so I searched for the answers to those questions. I had to look deeply at the pain and misery, all the self-loathing that I had. I had to really look at it, figure out what was going on there to fix it. So that way I could make sure when I passed on, I actually left something behind for other people. In October of that year, my dear auntie, my father's sister, challenged me to write a book with her. I told her I really wanted to be a writer. I really wanted to do that. So she said, hey, November's coming up. There's a thing they call National November Writing Month. NaNoWriMo! Can you imagine me writing a book in just 1 month, 30 days, that's it? I would never have thought I could have done it. I thought that was impossible. It couldn't happen to me. I was too lazy. I was too distracted. I'm just not the guy to do that. I'm too complacent. I'm just whatever, let life happen to me. But one book, 50,000 words in just 30 days? Insane, crazy, not possible. That's the negative self-talk I told myself, and it was just too much work, too much effort. I could just play games on the computer, escape from reality, but essentially escape from myself and who I really wanted to be. So for October, I thought about it. I'm doing an hour or two of cardio every day, and I had just finished in July a weight loss challenge where an amazing trainer at the gym I was going to, thank you Tanya, she encouraged me to lose my morning weight, check some of my vitals to really get healthier. So I did. I lost 40 pounds, and I realized that if I can lose that 40 pounds, if I can look at my eating habits every day, if I can look at what cardio I'm doing every day, if I can look at every calorie, then I can write a book. So I continued with my cardio, and I would imagine the beginning of a book, I would imagine the ending of a book, and some of the middle. But I knew this book, and that's when book 1 and book 2 started to be born. And when I went into NaNoWriMo, I wrote book 1. So here is my challenge to you. Don't wait until life hits you with a razor wire covered baseball bat before you start. Start now. Start right now. Don't put it off to tomorrow. Who cares what time it is? Just start now, right now. Keep playing this video. Turn it off. Put on some good music. Whatever it is you need to do, do it. Go get a pen, go get a paintbrush, get your phone, start recording your own video. Do it now because there might not be a tomorrow. You may never be able to start, so don't go quietly into that long good night, and do not go silently into that final goodbye. There are a ton of crazy things going on right now in the world, so don't let this be your last story that you ever tell. Continue to challenge yourself, and challenge yourself to continue. You know it's going to be bad, and that's okay. It's going to be terrible, and it's going to be awful. My first book, my first draft, got hit by lightning and got literally set on fire by the cosmos. So how worse can whatever you do be compared to the worst I've ever done? So your painting, your sculpture, your movie, your book, whatever it is gonna be fine. And just make it. Share it with the world. You might touch someone else who can start their own story and their journey. And if you don't know how to do something that you're desperately wanting to do, learn. There are online guides, there are YouTube videos like this one and many other people much better than me. There's online training courses, and you can do this. You can do this without any money. Just start with a pen and a piece of paper. Start with whatever paint you have lying around. Go get a piece of wood and a butter knife if you have to. But whatever it is you desperately want to do, start now, because what happens if tomorrow never comes and you've never started? Les Brown, my favorite motivational speaker, quoted Dr. Howard Thurman in his video, "You have greatness in you." And Dr. Thurman said to imagine your dreams, your ideas, your gifts, your talents. If you didn't do them, they'd be standing around your bed with large, angry eyes saying, "We came to you and only you could have given us life. And now, because you didn't, we will die forever." I imagined the characters I had created. I imagined the worlds I had invented. I imagined the universes I had discovered. I'm thinking about myself as though I'm on my deathbed, like my father, and the characters that I loved with the deepest parts of my soul dying, dead forever. I had this thought and inspiration on a run in the middle of the woods, training for a half marathon, and my headphones were on as I'm listening to this video, and I started sobbing. I started mourning the wonders I had created but never shared. They were going to die with me if I did not create them more fully. I knew book 3 was terrible. I knew it was awful. But what could I do? So I sobbed in the middle of the woods, and I knew I had to change. I had to do everything I had to bring them to life and figure out what problem I was having to figure out how to do it better. So I would read any book on writing, I'd watch any video on writing, even the ones we've all seen them a million times. Let's talk about active versus passive voice. Sure, I'll watch it again, and I'll watch it again until I get it right. And if I have to watch that video 1,000 times, then I'm gonna watch it with a smile and a pad of paper to take notes, so that way I can get better because it's that important to me. I worked, I studied, I suffered. I had to become supremely humble. I knew book 1 was bad, and I knew book 2 was slightly better but still bad, and I knew book 3 was broken beyond repair. But I loved these characters. I loved this world I had created, and I loved the universe that flew through my mind. My father did everything he could to make my life better. He wasn't perfect, nobody is. But I, like my father, had to do anything to bring these children that I had imagined in my mind to life. And at this point today, I don't really care if I'm published with an advance beyond my vain imaginings of avarice. I want to tell a story worth reading. I want to touch a reader so much that when they close one of my books, it touched their souls and started them on a journey to find their own personal peace and wonder. I want to make my life worth it to help other people become better than where they are. That's a common theme in everything I've written. Sure, zero debt and a house would be nice. My mom's basement isn't so bad, but book 3 almost broke me. This video, as I was writing it especially, almost broke me. I hope someone hears this. Hear and listen that whatever it is you want to do, whatever dreams you have, whatever you want to bring into this world, do it now. Keep doing it. Keep going until you become the best version of you that you can be. And don't compare yourself to anybody else and where they're at or what they're doing, because there's only one person that can tell your story, that can go on your journey, and that's you. And you're the only one that can become the most amazing version of yourself, because there is nobody else that can be that. You'll have to fight an inner battle with yourself, and you'll have to fight some things that you don't want to go through and things that you don't want to think about and to confront. But when you win that battle, you create wonders. I hope this video speaks to you. I hope this video really touches you. And if you've not been doing the thing that you've really been wanting to do, please do the thing. Start now. And I hope my journey has touched you, inspired you, at least made me laugh maybe. But I hope whatever you do create brings you love, peace, and happiness. And I give you my sincere love to please take care of yourself and to take care of the seed in you that can grow into a whole universe of wonders.